Well, we went 20 minutes over. And now we're on time. That's all we did.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's
What?
a really hard
Doing
job.
the best.
Yeah.
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 Okay,
I don't.
probably do need a break.
It's okay to play with.
Oh my God. It's a lot to manage.
Okay. I guess I don't need my gavel.
You need even water there.
I've got water and I've got coffee. Okay, I needed caffeine.
Both sides are.
Okay, next up we have, actually this is the last one, is the Sheriff's Office within the Safety and Justice team. And so I will turn it over to Gloria, or Deputy County Manager Reyes. Do you want to make any comments?
No, just pass
Okay,
it on to the sheriff.
then Sheriff Fletcher.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We will try to keep you on schedule so you get to that 5 o'clock hearing. Hopefully a little break in there for you before you start. I'm going to introduce our team. I think some of you have not met the entire team, but I also just put a one-page handout there in your hands in terms of what the statutes say about the sheriff's duties. And the reason I mention that, in addition to the county's performance measures, we try to measure our performance on what the statute expects out of us as well. And those are just simply straightforward statutes from there. And you'll see the first one is keep and preserve the peace of the county. And I think John might have left, but I wanted to tell you that we have had amazing success the last 3 years. Carjackings are down 70%, auto thefts down 40%, robberies down 40%, and I attribute a lot of that to the partnership we have with the county attorney's office on having navigators from the African American Leadership Council help us work with these kids and divert them to more successful lives. So very excited about statute number 1. Pursue and apprehend all felons. We have 3,100 felony warrants right now in Ramsey County. Now, probably 1,000 people that actually have warrants because some of them have multiple, but we have the most effective and efficient apprehension unit in the state of Minnesota. But it still doesn't mean we can arrest all of them, of course. Execute all processes. A lot of civil work goes in executing documents and delivering them. It may not show up as a county performance measure, but day in, day out, our deputies, so far this year, 4,300 civil process papers have been
Fletcher.
served. I'm going to be very brief.
Well, I'm sorry, but we only have a certain amount of time, and this is a
Yeah,
budget
I'm going to be very brief. But I did want to, when I get to the, you'll see there, number 5 is attend to the terms of the district court. Chinu Lee, please stand up. He won't be talking today. Kyle Meested's going to do most of our presentation, but Chinu is in charge of our courts division, both the civil papers that are being delivered, et cetera. And of course, on the next thing you'll see, the county jail, probably our most important function really is making sure that the jail is run safely and that people that are in our custody are treated well and have some opportunity. And Ashley Bryant is here. She's going to talk about that topic, and I think you'll be very impressed with some of the creative ideas that she's come up with in terms of working in the jail. So let me just say that there's a lot of great things going on, and I don't want to burden you with this, but you got my letter about staffing. And the problem is, without proper staffing, this can't continue. You're 7 times more likely to get carjacked in Minneapolis because they're 40% down on their staffing. And our staff are leaving for higher paid jobs. One of our staff just left yesterday to go to Roseville, neighboring city, for a $5 an hour raise and a $10,000 bonus. So as we work through this next few months, I hope you'll help us address that staffing issue. With that, I'm going to introduce Kyle Meested, Under Sheriff Kyle Meested, to come on up here and walk you through our performance measures slide. And I told him, talk fast. Talk fast.
How much time is that?
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff Fletcher.
Next slide, please.
And welcome, Kyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. The Sheriff touched on what we did, so we can skip past this slide. I think we'll just hop right into our performance measures. Next slide, Rich, please. So this table here, the measures in the red color aligns with the county's overall performance measurement plan and what we report as part of that work. The measures in the gray are what we report as an office, in addition to what the sheriff touched on. Under Sheriff Ashley Bryant, we'll talk about the jail in greater detail. The county attorney's office did talk on expungements. We'll talk a little bit about that. Hand it over to our chief deputy to unpack that topic a little bit more. And then we try and be intentional about having some of our performance measures align with some of the broader work of the county, especially on the work on bail reform, pretrial justice, those sorts of pieces. I've been part of that work for quite a while now. So has Ashley Bryant. Laura's been on board now, and that's been awesome to help move some of that work along. So Rich, next slide, please. And again, next slide. And so this slide talks about diversity in the sheriff's office in terms of staff who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Overall, we can see a constant rate of growth year over year. In terms of our diversity, that same trend continues in staff who become formal leaders, supervisors, sergeants, lieutenants, commanders, and so forth. So as an office, we're committed to building a more reflective workforce, not just among the sworn ranks, but correctional, office support staff, professional staff, and so forth. And so I know there's a topic around HR, talking about diversity, talking about recruitment and those efforts. We operate very good, robust recruitment programs as well. Next slide. Turnover rate in recent years has trended upward. Two reasons for that. One, post-traumatic stress, and two, as the sheriff touched on, and as the county attorney touched on, staff are leaving our office, our county, for better high-paying jobs. And so that has resulted in some higher than average turnover than we've seen in previous years. Traditionally, when you get a law enforcement job, you'll work for that agency for 20, 30 years and retire. It's a more common trend, like the sheriff touched on, with our deputy going over to Roseville. Different now than it was, when I started or when the sheriff started. You usually would have tenure. But again, hopefully more competitive wages would help address turnover, would help address retention as well as overall recruitment strategies. Next slide,
Do you
please.
have, I know you've got staff diversity coming up, but do we have, and maybe there's numbers in here, as far as we've had this issue come up before as far as the diversity within the turnover. And do you have that in here or not?
Madam Chair, we don't. We followed the instructions provided by the county for this, but I think, if we want to do a deeper dive, we can work with policy planning, HR, and pull that.
Okay.
It's a good, to have that denominator like you talked about would be, I think,
Right.
helpful than just the percentage.
Yeah, and we, each one is a little bit different, and so we've got having the performance measure is great, but kind of knowing, okay, what do those numbers mean?
The baseline, yeah.
We can get that.
Is it one
Okay.
or is it two? I mean, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Next slide, Rich, please. So again, efforts on diversity, leadership diversity, and turnover, again, really centers on the idea of more competitive wages, pay structures. We've also leveraged so far to date one Pathways policing grant for her Vang to help use some state funding to help her become help her go from the correctional officer job series to a deputy job series. And so as the state opens up more funding opportunities for Pathways to Policing, we'll probably be submitting a couple applications. Go ahead, Rich. Again, this slide really touches on the themes the sheriff touched on. I did also note on employee wellness. Our deputy county manager talked on that in terms of our work to expand employee wellness programming in the sheriff's office. That's been done in part by some public safety aid and has been very helpful, so thank you for that. We're also leveraging a federal grant for law enforcement mental health to support that work as well.
You really don't have to rush through, we do have until 4:30. Because we don't even have time to formulate our questions here. Okay.
That might be the strategy, I don't know if it's
Honestly.
Sorry.
logic models. That gambling connection always comes back.
That was good.
Okay.
as we look at small business spend in the sheriff's office, we would know, the county attorney's office had points in front of their numbers. We don't. So we've seen a growth in our procurement spend over the last few years. That's primarily been concentrated on the fact that the vendor that we're using to construct suicide prevention barriers in the jail is a certified vendor. I believe it's a woman-owned business. Our contract manager would know more about this, but it's a certified vendor through the program that we've been able to connect with somebody local to help construct all the safety barriers that we're doing in the jail. So the jail has 2 tiers. The top tier is open. Unfortunately, sometimes people will attempt self-harm by jumping over. We're in the process of constructing physical barriers year over year. It's been a multi-year project funded by capital improvement funds. And so that's why our spending has gone up in that category.
Commissioner Zhang.
Thank you. I was just kind of looking through the slides ahead too, and you had said like mental health is a key one of like the overrepresentation in the jail. I'm wondering if there have been a lot of like partnerships with mental health workers in that area, because and I'm just tying it to this because it's like we're spending money on like suicide prevention, and it really we shouldn't be holding people with like who are suicidal. Yeah.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I think, Ashley, if you want to join, we can save some of this to the jail population conversation, but in terms of, Ramsey County Correctional Health does provide correctional health services to the jail. Social Services does have mental health providers. I don't know if you want to touch on that now or wait till your part.
Go ahead.
You can go ahead. Yeah.
We do have mental health on-site. We also have medical on-site. And so they are reaching out daily to our population to serve them with their mental health needs. Unfortunately, many individuals in our jail have mental health needs. Our jail is not meant for that. Our jail was designed, I would say 20 years ago. I think the idea of incarceration was to be punitive, and we are working to humanize incarceration. It is difficult to do that with the architecture of our facility. There is no fresh air, there is no sunlight that these individuals see, and some individuals with mental health issues have been there in upwards of 3 years. So imagine not having sunlight or fresh air for 3 years. And so I think we can do better, and that is what we're working towards.
Okay. Commissioner Fretham.
Well, and it's my understanding this really intersects with the challenges we're having finding that mental health care in the community or in secured facilities for folks who aren't competent to stand trial, and then they end up just languishing at the ADC because there isn't an appropriate place for them to be in the community. So this is part of that larger picture that we're seeing in some of the similar issues with the JDC and people being there for longer than they should because we don't have an appropriate placement for them. And so that's that balance of how do we house folks in a way that is humane and doesn't do more harm, but also we need to move up and get those places in the community as well.
Absolutely.
And I think to some extent, too, the physical plant of the jail was designed for a stay of 5 to 7 days, as a pretrial facility, the correctional facility by contrast, open dormitory style, outdoor space, very different intents from construction. And I think some of this dovetails to the Rule 20s, folks in the state laws there and those provisions that have changed with human services, folks waiting in custody longer than they probably ought to, in hopes they can secure a state bed at some point.
And I can tell you with a new online jail roster that's available, I ran those numbers this morning, and we have 203 individuals who have been in custody over 30 days, and of those, 69 of them are over 100 days. And so you look at the population in custody, I know it's kind of a tenuous issue, but the workhouse is empty. They have sunlight, they have fresh air, and I know there's a kind of a idea to make that more juvenile based, but in the meantime, allowing us to utilize that for mental health would be phenomenal. And those are just some ideas that we're kind of throwing forward, working collaboratively with different entities and just seeing what we can do with the resources we already have.
Well, and I do think, the Adult Detention Center is supposed to be pretrial. It is not a correctional facility. And so I don't know what we need to work with there, because I don't know how someone could be there for 3 years and not have a trial. I mean, they've been charged with something, right?
Yep.
That doesn't, I mean, regardless of where they are, it's not related to anything that you have any control over. But I thought there was something on due process and a timely trial and all those things. And so what could possibly keep somebody there for 3 years?
Madam Chair, the individual in custody who is there for 3 years has been deemed incompetent to stand trial and is waiting for a bed at St. Peter. Unfortunately, individuals at St. Peter do not leave, and we've been told in upwards of 5 to 7 years for that individual to remain in our custody.
Okay, so there hasn't been a trial because he's not competent, or she is, or he, I guess, not competent to stand trial.
Correct. But we do have other people in custody that are criminally charged, and due to delays in the courts, or let's say they fire their attorney multiple times, it delays the process.
Okay, I think that's data that would be helpful for us to know who's the, not who, but numbers of who is there, the length of time, and just to have that broken down, that I think would be helpful.
I think what we have right now,
Is that,
There's a dashboard.
what we have right now, the number is 1,011 days in jail.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
1,011 days in jail is, he's been in jail for 1,011 days for second degree with intent. Not premeditated, so 111 days in jail he's been in.
Should be
Well,
out
he's
of
been in the
Madam
adult
Chair.
detention center.
Yes.
Which is pretrial.
Pretrial.
And so, and is that the one that has the incompetent?
I don't
No.
think that is the
No,
one.
that isn't.
No, it is not.
So why?
It says on
Oh,
both
it's-
for,
Okay.
you have another one for 943 days.
Correct,
You have
yes.
another one for 670 days.
We,
You have another for
Yeah.
560 days. You have another one.
Okay, and that's information that would be helpful for us. And for those that are there for that long, there's got to be a reason, because legally, I can't imagine that you could charge
I
somebody
think-
with something and
yeah.
not take them to trial and do it legally without some extenuating circumstance that allows that.
Yeah,
So-
we have to really review the whole system, from, the prosecutor side, the court side. I mean, we have to evaluate the whole system, and because the whole system really is a barrier, from the pretrial, from, courts, backlog, and there's just a lot of challenges. We don't have places to refer people who really need the help, that's all,
And
an
that-
alternative.
And that analysis starts, of course, with the data.
Yeah,
So, yes, we do need that. I had two hands up, and I'm just going to go Commissioner Moran and Commissioner McGuire, because I don't remember who had their hand up first.
Okay, So it is a big issue around mental health right now, right? Because if someone is deemed incompetent, they can't stand trial, but at the same time, there's no place for them to go. But isn't it also, believe I heard that those who are being deemed incompetent are sometimes also released back into the community? Is that also a practice?
It is a practice. They usually go to a treatment facility prior to that.
They usually go to a facility versus just released back into the community?
Correct, and they're waiting for beds. For the Rule 20s, we hover around 35 to 40 Rule 20s pending. We have, as of today, 11 individuals that are waiting for beds.
And you might, for the people that are watching, to just, if you could briefly describe what Rule 20 is?
I'm sorry, it's whether to show if they are competent or not to stand trial.
And the problem is we just don't have enough spaces. And the way the prisons are built today, it's not easy to provide those type of services safely within the jail system.
Correct. We do provide them safely because mental health is on
Services.
site. The services, but as far as what they really need, the extensive, exhaustive treatment to be able to get them and reintegrated back in the community, we do not have those.
Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just to remind everyone here, yes, this is a huge issue, and as you get the numbers, I'd love to know, how many are waiting for a mental health facility, you know, an intense mental health facility, and how many are waiting for this and how many are waiting for that. That would be really helpful. But just to let you all know, every county in the state and the country is faced with this, and that's why we had this resolution that was passed out of Human Services at AMC, and then passed also by Public Safety, is that we need a task force to look at with the state, you know, getting some facilities for these people, because every county is faced with where do we put these people that need more intense services than each jail can provide on its own. And so Anoka's full, and I mean, all the different facilities, the few facilities that are available are full, and they're not getting open very, very fast. So every county is faced with this. It's why AMC is being tasked now with this task force. It's something we all, and we're gonna band with our other counties in the state to say, what can we come up with to help? Because the county doesn't need to do it by themselves. We should be with other counties to, and the state should, quite frankly, do this. So we really want the state to provide.
Well, and I believe that the work that is going to be done, that Deputy County Manager Reyes talked about, as far as that system analysis and getting that data, then we can take that to the table for AMC to say, okay, this is the issue, because right now we're talking about it in a more, general way, and when you have the data to back it up, and I think it's a great idea to do that full system analysis and not just take parts of it, so that the legislators, AMC, that we've got data that they can look at and say, this is a real problem, and this is why. Is going to be helpful. We also have more slides in here about the Adult Detention Center, so, but this is more system-wide. I think Commissioner Zhang, you had your hand up, and then if there's, but we do have more slides on the Adult Detention Center.
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, then we'll move on.
Okay, so back with respect to procurement spending and whatnot, we are going to continue upgrading, adding suicide prevention barriers throughout the jail. We are going to have to return to the county board with a sole source request to continue that. We've exceeded the contract dollar amount. It doesn't make sense to put it out for bid because we have a contractor that's already done several projects for us. We want to continue that, and so you'll see that in the coming weeks. Is
it a contract that's already in place? Why wouldn't we just extend it?
I think we've reached the extension of it and the dollar amount at the time, so I'm guessing when...
Well, I'll let the county manager and you work that out.
Perfect. So you'll see a single sole source request coming forward for some construction work for the jail. Just know that that's to continue the suicide prevention barriers.
Okay.
Next slide, please.
Gender diversity. On a positive note, the sheriff's office is 36% female for sworn. Nationally, women represent 12% for sworn and 3% for leadership of women in policing. There's an initiative out there, it's called 30 by 30, and the idea of that is to increase representation of women to 30% by 2030. We have already hit that for the sworn side. We are at, for our entire office, we are at 26% last year. I believe we're at 27% this year as of now. We're trying to stay at that number or go above that. Just in seeing, coming into the detention center, if you don't understand how it kind of works, is correctional officers generally start their career in the ADC, and a lot of them go to school to become law enforcement officers. In the past, many of those correctional officers have transitioned to become Ramsey County deputies. Unfortunately, we're now seeing those correctional officers leave to other departments, and so that investment of that employee is now leaving, and we're not gaining that. Just when I came in, we had 2 female correctional officers leave. I believe they went to Washington County. The person that they spoke of that went to Roseville is a person of color. So just anecdotally, we are losing the women and people of color because it is so competitive out there. As far as correctional officer hiring, this is the 5th hiring cycle. We're doing interviews today, and we have not been able to fill all of our vacancies as far as we hire and then people leave. We hire, people leave, and it's becoming where I have so many big ideas. There's so many correctional officers there that want to do other things, but we can only focus on the safety and security of the facility at this time because we're so understaffed. And unfortunately, we don't really see any end in sight because the people who are coming in as candidates are in simultaneous hiring processes. And so they might go to our academy and then the next week they get an offer to a different county and they leave. So the intangible costs are that we are wasting our time training these individuals to be a part of Ramsey County, and they're just leaving. So they're leaving very well trained, and we would like to retain them. And so that's why when we look at the gender diversity, because it is a lot of females and people of color that are leaving, we want to try and get a hold on that before it gets too bad.
It would seem to me that we could do something as far as if you take our training, or we train you, and you leave before you even start the job. There, I mean, I don't know what HR can do, but I know if you're going into different professions where the employer is training, you have a commitment for, it doesn't have to be a long time, but at least so that you can get your money's worth out of it. But having somebody, I don't know how often that happens, so I guess maybe we need the information. I also, I thought I heard you say something that I hope you didn't say. And that was that you couldn't guarantee safety within the...
No, we have programming that we'd like to do, but we can't do that because we're only focusing on the safety and security of the facility.
Okay.
Yes.
No. It was like I said, I was like, no, they couldn't have said that and just kept going. So, okay.
Yes.
So it's, you have to trade off to make sure the safety is first, obviously.
Correct.
And then programming and some other things that you're not able to do as much of that as you'd like. It's not that you can't do it at all.
Right.
Okay.
Before COVID, the majority of our programming was done by volunteers. After COVID, they didn't want to come back. A lot of those volunteers are elderly. The jail is a large population in a small area. And so we saw a lot of those volunteers that we had depended on for years not want to come back. And so the thought process is to get more correctional officer-led programming in order to facilitate a more robust idea of humanizing incarceration, so it's not just the uniform that we're the villain all the time. We do help these individuals who are in custody, and we want to work towards reintegrating them into the community versus just kicking them out the door and hoping for the best.
Well, and again, with that would be for the correctional facility.
They're pretrial, though.
Pretrial detention, you shouldn't have a whole lot of time to rehabilitate someone there, but I guess in some cases you do. But there's a line there as far as programming. There's a lot more programming to rehabilitate people at I would think anyhow, at the correctional facility.
The early intervention piece too, I think, is key.
Yeah. So a lot of times there's so many different hearings that an individual has to go through before jury trial. So and that each one of those hearings is many days out. And so they do end up staying for a long time. They have idle time in the jail, so why not utilize that time? And I think a lot of them are also looking for that because, I mean, this is one of those places that you can learn anything you want because you have all the time in the world. No responsibility except to get up and eat and behave yourself. And so we have actually created some really great units now. We call them G units, and those are basically they're very well behaved. We provide incentive based towards their behavior. We're providing them, the individual who has been there 3 years was an art teacher, and so we've provided art supplies and things like that. And so we're trying to tailor their needs based on what is important to them. And I think we can do more on that. It is just more doing a self-inventory assessment of each individual and taking that time, and then figuring out where their triggers are, what they need in the community, and getting them aligned with those services prior to being released. Because if you're coming in addicted to drugs, you have 6 days to sober up, why not then get them into something instead of just kicking them out the door? And a lot of times, because we just let them out, they go back to their old habits, and then we see them again. And so interrupting that cycle with services and not having them have to wait 2 weeks to go get an appointment somewhere, because once we release them, that's where they need the help. So,
Well, I can see it would be more difficult in the pre-trial detention center also, because hopefully they're not there that long before they have the trial and see what's happening there. But in the correctional facility, you know how long, or pretty much how long they're going to be there. So, and it's our correctional facility is what is it? Is it up to 18 months, or what is it?
Should be a year.
A year? A year, okay.
Yeah. A
So
year and a
they
year.
could have been in prison and then the last year can come to us? Or if it's less, if it's a year, then they can just come to us?
So usually if it's a year or less, they'll serve local, people will serve local
Okay.
time.
Okay,
And then if it's a year or a day, it's a commitment to the Commissioner of Corrections at the state level. And then under sentencing guidelines, there's different criteria, but it's presumed, I think, a portion of that then is on supervised release, depending on how whatever the court orders.
I thought there was something where when you got to the end, if you were in the state prison, or federal, I suppose it's even more, but that you could be released to finish your term
Yeah.
at ours. Okay,
Unsupervised release or intensive, it's a community corrections function.
okay.
A 1/3, 2/3 split or something. I don't remember the name.
The commissioner tried to push their inmates on us for the last year, but that really didn't get legs ultimately.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Chung, did I call on you, or Commissioner Moran? Or
I don't think.
Commissioner Zhang, Commissioner Moran, you both, I think you both had your hands up and I don't remember.
I don't think so. I'm fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
Commissioner
So
Moran.
first, I just want to say thank you for humanizing this work that has not always been humanized, and talk about going, I want to say, a little bit upstream and try to provide services. Because people are coming in with, mental health issues along with substance use disorder. And so having a pathway for services would be great if that could happen. I know you also mentioned that you're wasting your time training, but not only are you wasting your time training, but you also are wasting dollars. It costs money to do that. And not only are people leaving because often because of the rate of pay within this system, but within Ramsey County other system, I mean, we are training a lot of people who are turning over and leaving. And a big part of that is within our frontline workers, right? Because we got that green screen that they're working with that often in competitive wages. So I do understand that the necessity to get more competitive with wages. I don't think I saw here, did you disaggregate the data around the diversity of your workforce? I saw you had here, you just said a percentage of staff who identify as Black and Indigenous. Is there a way for you to disaggregate the data?
I think, Larry, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I think from policy and planning, there's the 2 standard categories, but we can do the deeper dive and report back what that looks like.
We've asked for that from others as well, so we can get that data.
I think this should be on the open data portal too by race.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner, it is on the workforce statistics report, at least for the major race and ethnic.
I don't think you have your microphone on because I can't hear you.
Apologies. Madam Chair, Commissioner Moran, yes, it is in our workforce statistics report, and it's broken down by service team and then department. So I'm not sure if this is working yet.
If you can get that to us, that would be awesome.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, okay, we can move on then.
So the next performance measure touches on the adult detention center average daily population.
Right. And this kind of goes back to what we're talking about with the bail reform and other partnerships regarding pretrial services and just different pilot programs. Our hope is to get that number down and figure out pretrial diversion even more so. We can't control who comes in our doors. We can't control the crimes that are committed, and we can't control the release factor because they're there by the order of the court. what we may be able to, my philosophy is that the jail population is a report card for our community, and the higher it goes, the more somebody's not receiving services, somebody's not getting the help that they need, or they're being triggered by something that they shouldn't be triggered by, and they haven't sought help because they don't know where it is. And so being able to get the transparency of where those resources are, reduce a waiting time for those kind of things, that maybe it will prevent people from coming into custody. And so also, the jail has always had a mysterious air to it. Nobody really knows what goes on in there. And I appreciate all the individuals who have been wanting to take a tour and see what it's like, because it is eye-opening when you come and look at our jail. But understanding that we also get to know those individuals when they're there long-term. We know the individuals when they've been here over and over again. To be able to give some of that information to community partnerships and say, this person is having issues with substance abuse. Here you go. This person is having issues with domestic violence. Here you go. We're able to do that because they are there with us for long periods of time. And I hope to create more programming and collaboration with community partners, the county attorney, and figuring out how to reduce that pretrial stay. So.
Would you next slide, Rich? I think we covered this a little bit. I don't know if you want to touch about tablets and CO-led programming.
Yeah. So again, I had already touched on the CO-led programming. I would love to get our staffing up so we do have individuals, correctional officers, be able to do the programming. Not only is it important for the people in custody, but I also think it's very important for correctional officers to have other opportunities. It is a very negative space to work in for 30 years. There's a lot of trauma that they go through, and to be able to give different opportunities under the job class of correctional officer, rather than saying you have to give up your pension and everything to go do X, Y, or Z. It would be nice to be able to get out of the box for options, or just provide other opportunities within that gives them a break from the daily grind of tours and verbal abuse and just. We have a lot of emergency, they call them A-team responses. So whenever somebody has a behavioral issue, we have those daily, sometimes multiple times a day, and it does wear on a correctional officer. So to give them a break, what that looks like, I don't know. But I think that is also good for our population, because that negativity, if there's that break, there's not the kind of the conflict of somebody who can't control, well, not control, who somebody is having a hard time with their stressors. And so I'd like to be able to have those in place. We're also hiring for an administrative planning assistant who is going to help with bail reform, and that will be super helpful and provide a bridge between our data and the data that the county would like. As far as...
Oh, I'm sorry, I could wait till you finish. I'm still on this slide, so if you want to finish this, then I can ask a question.
No, go ahead.
So you mentioned something about when people are in there for a long time that you can assess if they need mental health or if they need domestic violence, support, or counseling. Do you have any ongoing program at the ADC, for people that are there short term, even just a week? There's nothing ongoing. I guess I'm thinking of our I don't know. I thought we had some ongoing program. Maybe I'm thinking of the workhouse. I don't know. For our people that are there, even just for a week or so, if they could do something with their time, like a art class or I don't know, reading.
I know that they're just hiring navigators, which I believe will also be kind of a bridge to that. As far as when they are released, there's the pretrial justice that I believe provides them with services as well. But when they're in our custody, there is no formalized programming. Yep.
Except the mental health support.
Oh, yes,
right?
of course, the mental health. But What we are hoping, though, is we're currently doing a solicitation for our communications. We have selected a vendor, and they're going through contract negotiations. With that, tablets will be implemented into our facility, and with the vendor that we selected, there are robust programming options available. Yes, absolutely. You could get your GED. Yes, and we are also working on getting more and more programming in there and trying to push that. We just come up against being short-staffed.
I appreciate that too. Madam Chair, just one more quick, so you probably said it already, but remind me, what's the average length of stay in our jail for people? And I know we have the really long-termers and we have the short-termers, but what's the average?
Yeah, it is case dependent.
Right, I get that, but sort of the average.
If you're for a felony, you're gonna be there a lot longer than someone who's there on a misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor, which should average between 42 to 47, no, 27 to 42 days for like a gross misdemeanor. And you can't pay the bond, and you can't pay the bond. That's what we forget to add in there, is because everyone has a bond per the statute, but most individuals can't pay the bond, so they have to
I get that, yeah. So that's a month, so I'm glad you're doing tablets. I mean, I'm glad you're thinking about some programs, because there's enough time there to at least get them thinking about doing something, so thank you.
I know when
And
we were
we do have
experiencing.
the data on that. I believe it said on the dashboard that there's information about.
Thank you, I just didn't have it right.
And so what I wrote down was, there's different reports and things that are on the dashboard, so that if we could pull those together so that we can bring them back to the board, that would be helpful.
I would say it would be very rare for a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor to be there past that 10-day frame, because there has been so much work towards that. The individuals who are there 30 days plus are going to be the felons.
Thank you.
Okay, County Manager Becker.
Yeah, I do think that the idea of investing in some opportunity for folks that are at the detention center is generally a good idea. In Workforce Solutions, we were working with the JDC on something very similar, knowing that some of those kids were there longer than we'd like. We were actually toying with, and they still are probably talking about, we're trying to name a program, but we were calling it kind of Familiar Faces. I know that's a COC program, so we want to be careful with the continuum of care, but just kind of recognizing that people don't have that social capital of resources, and so even if they can meet somebody while they're detained, that's a familiar face, that when they become released, that they could reconnect with them, right? And so I think it is a thing we should continue to work through, even on short-term detentions, both at the JDC and the ADC, because it is a chance that we have someone's captive attention to have them learn about programs. So I do appreciate the intentionality for this conversation, so thank you for that.
And it sounds like the navigators will help with that. It's not the only answer, though.
Correct. I would love to partner with felon-friendly employment. If they need a week training, we can do a week training if they give us that training program, because they are in our custody. Of course, it would need the staffing to do
That's a good idea.
but just think of what it does for the community to have somebody released from jail and start a job.
I think as we transition from adult detention center to the court functions, we should also note that you started as a correctional officer.
Yes, I did.
And then the population yesterday morning was sitting at 458.
458, yeah.
So we're back high again. All the more need for some of these services and work to continue.
What is the maximum?
Go about 495, but then you get the state rule
Okay, so
there.
we're not over the
that's-
maximum anyway.
yeah.
Okay.
That's one max we don't want to hit, you know? That's-
No,
that's-
we do not. Thank you.
We'll go to the next slide, Rich, please. This will transition into the functions the sheriff talked about with respect to court services. Our chief deputy will be up to speak a little bit more about it in greater detail, but we do provide 2 performance measures as it relates to our mandates for court services, number of expungements processed. So as the county attorney touched on, expungements and that process, his office will lead that work. Ultimately, the expungement comes to us to take care of the data entry, and the clerk will work around that. So, because we're the arresting repository for the county, different agencies have different access to different databases and whatnot. So we have to go and physically remove the expungements, handle the record side, We do know that expungements, as the county attorney touched on, that the criminal conviction, that record can be a barrier to housing, employment, education, and so forth. So if the courts determine that a person's record can be expunged, we will process that, and that helps provide for a higher quality of life. The other piece of performance measures that we report on is the percentage of emergency papers served within 5 days. So when there's an order for protection or harassment restraining order or domestic violence no contact order, the court will issue it. It comes to the sheriff's office civil process unit. We have deputies that will go serve the respondent in that matter and say, you're no longer allowed to have contact with this person because they're a victim of harassment, stalking, domestic violence, so forth. We try and serve all of the papers as quickly and as fast as possible, provide that extra layer of protection for victims of crime in those particular situations. Our service rates tend to be relatively high, which means we're having a positive impact there.
I suspect that it's about as high as it can get because it's not as if the person you're serving doesn't know they're being, in most cases they know they're being served.
Yes.
And so they're going to hide out. They don't want to be served, even though they know it's on the record.
And they'll go and hide, they'll
Yeah.
run. There's some new statutory mandates the chief will talk about that talks about how we process them differently than we have historically before, just to help improve the service rate. So Dave, I think if you're...
I do
I'm trying.
think before you move off of this slide, there's really a drastic difference between the expungements processed goal for you and for the county attorney's office, because the county attorney's office doesn't want to handle 2,900. And so, well, yeah, and so just know that even within our budget between the two, that the county attorney's office and the sheriff's office who handle this, that's a partnership. It has to be.
Absolutely.
So there's a little discrepancy there, which is not your fault or his, so just wanted to point it out.
We'll unpack that too.
All right, can we go to the last slide? The timeline, is this on, Kyle?
Yep, it should be.
All right. Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Dave Methuselah, Chief Deputy of the Sheriff's Office. I just wanted to start, so this is not, some people I've had conversations with think this is kind of a surprise and bad timing that we're talking about this issue. And just so you know, this was in our budget book last year, and a couple of things that have occurred since then. Scott Williams called me last August and to talk about staffing implications. We both realized there were going to be those implications. So I assigned it to Under Sheriff Tina McNamara at the time, and she came back doing significant work on it and came back with a request for 7 FTEs in the fall. But I was not comfortable that we had enough data to make a big ask like that. So we had in conversations with Scott decided let's experience the first quarter of this year, and then the goal was to in the spring get to a workshop with you, so that would have come long before this. But there's a variety of turnover, a variety of things, no one's fault that we end up presenting this here today. My assumption is you may want to have a workshop on it to do a deeper dive than we could do today. But what I wanted to talk about first is
Could I just ask a question, because I thought this came in last night, this slide. So this was in our last year's?
the timeline was not, Madam Chair. Just the issue.
Okay,
The issue.
gotcha.
So the timeline is not what was.
How did I miss this last time?
No, Madam
Okay.
Chair, what was happening with all the turnover, I was having various conversations with people that thought we were popping a big surprise on them of something that's a big deal, and this has really been in the pipeline since July, August of last year. So at any rate, as the first quarter, we're able to, call that request down to identifying 4 FTEs that were needed for these issues, and they really are separated into 2 categories. I'm going to start with what I think is the most important one, and that's the domestic abuse orders, harassment orders, things of that nature. And the background on that is what happened is the FBI audited the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. They said the process you're using is all wrong, and they have a much better process that then the state required that we use. And so that creates about an hour extra administrative work per order. Let me just look at my notes here quick. So basically, staff are handling these things with much more, data entry and work required searching databases. the overarching goal of this is by searching all these databases and having all that data entry in portals, those people you're talking about that are trying to hide out, that don't want to get served, the data that our deputies and police officers on the streets will have is more known addresses, more known employers, more known cell phone numbers, possibly more known associates. So the overarching goal is to get this rather thin safety net, if you have some experience in this area, to be a much stronger safety net for victims. So the more data, the more likely the person will be served, and the more likely the order will be enforced. Because as we know, if we don't serve the person and they go violate an order that exists, if they haven't been served, police officer won't take them in. So that is the goal of this. And what I asked our commander in civil process to do is to do a time study on these and come up with an average of what is required. So they came up with about an hour. Now, somewhere a person has a lot of criminal records in different databases, that time can be much longer. But based upon our 5-year average has been 3,200 a year. So 3,200 hours of work with this.
Can you tell me where you're at on this page?
Well, this is just my personal notes.
Oh, okay, never mind.
So I remember what to say and not miss anything.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I thought you were referring to something on here, and I was not.
No, I apologize.
That's okay.
So currently this year we're averaging 324 papers a month, which is about $3,888 a year. So about 2 FTEs to properly do this, and we think this is. I mean, it fits with criminal justice reform. It fits with the goals of the county, and really all of our moral obligation to protect victims to every degree that we can. So I'm extremely comfortable with going forward with a number of 2 FTEs to make this work, make it more efficient, and provide that safety for victims. Are there questions on that one before you want me to go on to the next one and get you out of here for a break?
Yeah, for a break. I don't see any hands up, so go ahead.
Okay. The next one is a little, the information's evolving fast. It's with the expungements, and kind of how this is rolled out, there's several tentacles to this, is the county attorney to a certain degree, both, or their prosecutors, both in, achieving plea deals and in supporting expungements and promoting them to a certain degree within reason. The expungements have picked up prior to any of the legislation. Now, the most current legislation, the cannabis expungements, there was a thought that that might be a temporary increase. What happened is we didn't get the list from the BCA till May. And the way they chose to do those lists is the agency that created the incident report gets the list. But so, for example, we got several hundred, but St. Paul Police got their list. But if that resulted in an arrest that created a jail record for us, we're going to have, and Maplewood Police is the only one thus far that has sent us those records, but there'll be several more expungements on that. The other thing that is coming is there's a board that's being put up. Let me see what the name of that is. Anyway, it's a cannabis expungement board for things that don't otherwise qualify under the initial legislation, where a separate board will look at that, and then we'll start getting those orders.
Is that statewide too?
Yes. And then also next year, the Clean Slate Act goes into effect, and that'll be thousands more because several more crimes are going to be included in that. Now, the more complicated part of this for our staff is the individual. What gets confused sometimes is that the individual is getting expunged. The individual is not getting expunged, specific charges are. So if a person comes in with 2 or more charges, say on a specific arrest, that record may only have 1 charge that's expungible. So the amount of work going in to extract data out of a record, but then let the record still reside without that data, or extracting narratives out of anything that's narrative collected, becomes extremely time consuming. So to support that work, and once again, the overarching goal is that for people to get employment, housing, et cetera, jobs, I mean, it stands in the way. So getting expunged is, I think, helpful economically for the community. So that's the other one. We think, what I would say on that is 2 full-time employees are what's needed right now, but I think you were here, Commissioner Reinhardt, back when we had the mortgage foreclosure crisis. We all recognized it was a crisis. We needed help immediately. The board gave us 2 FTEs for that, but with starring them, I think Janice Rettman used to love to use that term, starring them, and then we went back at some point. So I mean, I would be hopeful on this topic that if we get the 2 FTEs and we handle the next year and a half or 2, that we can come back and report to you and possibly it's a long-term need of only one as opposed to two. So, and I'd be happy to take questions or any direction. If Gloria and I have spoken, I mean, this workshop we were hoping to have in May got moved out of whether there's more information you need and you want to have a workshop or what next steps you might envision.
Well, I know that there's a workshop that's going to be pulled together with an overall systems analysis, and I assume that this would be part of that, and with the data.
We can include that.
Okay, so, yeah, we've got that. We don't have a date on it yet, but we do have that, that we need to have more of an overall systems analysis to figure out how to, well, as you pointed out, AMC is looking at trying to do some things with that as well. So our data is going to be important to be added to that.
Right.
Commissioner McGuire?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm not sure. So the county attorney legally does an expungement, but then you have to take it off the record. So explain to me who does what in this, because we need, and if he does all the expungements he thinks he could do, you're going to get even more expungements to handle. So
Well,
he makes sure
no, the
that
number they
can
had
handle
was
them.
quite a bit higher than the county attorney's office.
Right, but they'll get even more then from the county attorney, because you get them from all over the place, right? You get them from every county.
Madam Chair.
You get them off our records.
I see.
Commissioner Wright, yes.
Just help me understand
That's
what your
correct.
role is and what the county attorney's role is.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, so when the county attorney gets an expungement, it generally goes before the bench and we get a court order to expunge it. And those court orders are very good in that they generally include every place the data resides, and every person that has data on that particular crime gets that notice from the court. What's a little more cumbersome with the state, we get a list from the BCA, for example, on cannabis expungement, and we're just legally required to do it, so it doesn't really need to touch the county attorney's office, except for if they have data residing in their databases, then they have that issue, but they don't have to execute a legal process because the expungement is in the law. So each one of these different forms of expungements all have their own different path, and it's known when an attorney, I just got one last week came from a law office with the court order to expunge, and they were very clear, every agency they listed that they thought had a record on that person to make sure it was expunged. Some of these other ones where they'll send, cannabis expungement to St. Paul Police. Well, if they ended up booking that person, we have that record, so the record is not really expunged unless they get that to us. So there's a lot more collaborative work that needs to be done with our law enforcement partners to make sure the full spirit of the law is being handled.
Oh, my goodness. So, yeah, so we'll probably I'll have more questions on that. I appreciate that all the work that you're doing. So you're the ones that really expunge it then. I was thinking the county attorney expunged it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, so they may have records on these cases themselves, but a lot of the cannabis ones are city attorneys that have them. So the cannabis cases that I'm talking about that would come from St. Paul Police Department for us to expunge if there was an associated booking record, they're also going to go to the city attorney because they're going to have some records of that individual too. It's not prescribed quite as clearly in law as what has to actually happen to make it work.
Wherever that case has touched,
They have to
it has to, in each individual,
In Ramsey County, does it touch both our county attorney and our sheriff's department?
Not
It could.
necessarily, yeah.
it could, but it maybe
But not
doesn't.
necessarily.
But it also could include and probably would include a municipality.
Right.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, also under those, mandates we were talking about before, obviously the first issue I talked about was, serving court orders and writs and things like that in the statute. And that's kind of an invisible unit to most people. The unit that does the expungements is in our law enforcement center on the first floor, and they have criminal history and warrants that are all executing their duties for the district court, and then gun permits is down there as well, which is our statutory mandate to turn those around in a certain amount of time.
Okay, it is now 4:14, and we really do have to get this wrapped up. We have closing comments, and then we go right in at 5 o'clock for the public hearing. Commissioner Frethem.
I just want to thank the Sheriff's Office. I think in 5 years, this is the best performance measures that I've seen, not only in the amount of information we've received and the conversations that we've had, but also the data that you're showing. There's been consistent growth. These are meaningful metrics, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you walking through kind of this history and getting to a place where we're narrowing down on a number of what you need for that support. And I appreciate that you've put the time in to think about that. I do hope we can continue that partnership and conversation, and that there are ways we can continue to partner. I think there's been some times where things are happening in both the sheriff's office and the county at large that can be duplicative, that we could combine to better support, and I hope we can continue to work towards that. And I just wanted to share my appreciation, and I think this goes a long way, at least for my part, in rebuilding some trust. So thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have closing comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners, for this time today. It was a very thoughtful process, so I want to thank Larry and Lydia for walking us through this process. I'm sure you're getting a lot of thank yous lately this week. But I don't have any closing comments. I just want to say thank you for this process. We appreciate being before you and walking through our performance measures. Yep.
Okay, well, I think I've actually gone over these a few times, but the requests for information was the ratio breakdown on the turnover number. The report broken down by gender and race is on the dashboard, and then basically everything that we've talked about when we do the workshop with the system analysis, we'll touch on each of these things, and we can go back, if you need to, you can go back and we can pull out specific questions. But I think you got a pretty good handle on what it is we need, so that looking at the entire system will help inform us on what we need to do in the future.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it will also help inform, and quite frankly, when I look at the list of statutes that have been done, I'm looking to Rena and Mai Chong, you're the vice chair of legislative. These are legislative mandates that don't have money with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we shouldn't just say, okay, yeah, we'll cover it. We need to put, and I know we have a lot of planks in our budget, in our platform regarding funding for mandates, but these are public safety mandates. Mm-hmm. And if you're serious, if the legislature is serious about trying to help in make our community safer, then they also should put some money in. Now, we know that we're never going to get fully funded, but the fact that our levy has gone up, the property tax portion of our budget has gone up to 45%, is a direct result of mandates. Again, mandates aren't bad, because it's to try and level the playing field. It's to try to make people safer, healthier, more secure, protections for kids, and all the things that are out there. It's not that they're bad, but the good ideas have to be funded. And if that falls to the county, it's our job to make sure that the legislators understand that and that they need to provide more funding.